And then all of a sudden find out that we were getting lied to. We were getting scammed. We got put into a Ponzi
What?
scheme. Yeah, right out the gate.
All right,
Yeah.
stop right there. You got to tell us about that.
I don't know what I can and can't share legally.
Ernie Conwell, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about life after sports primarily. But first, I've got to say, lifelong Titans fan. So it's pretty painful to have you on the show, knowing you broke my heart. What was it, 1999?
Yes, it was.
When you won a Super Bowl by a yard.
Yeah.
Where were you standing on that play? Because the Titans had the ball driving down the field.
Yep.
They tackle Kevin Dyson a yard short, and you guys celebrate.
Yeah, actually, the way that on our sideline, they were going down towards our defensive side. So, the defensive players were on that side of the 50, if you will. So I was actually we were down. I was down with Kurt Warner, our quarterback, and our other offensive guys, and we were down on like the opposite 30 or 40 yard line. And so, and everybody's standing up as about as far as you're allowed to without getting a penalty by getting in the official's area, right? So everyone's up, and so we're watching. And when the play happened, I was starting to tighten my gloves, and Kurt was starting to look for a ball because we had thought immediately, yeah, they just scored. There were things going to go. We're getting ready to go to overtime. And so, it was like I remember that was the first thing. Like, all right, here we go. This thing's not over yet. And then there was like this awkward pause, right? I think the whole stadium, everybody, I think there was this awkward pause because I don't think, a lot of people didn't see what happened. I think some people down there recognized like, yeah, it didn't get in. But then when the officials were like, yeah, game over, whistle, we see the clock's down to 0 and there's no score. And it's just like pure pandemonium. It's crazy. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that we just won the Super Bowl, because you're so locked into that moment and you're so prepared for, hey, what's happening next? But it was amazing, right? And it was just the way that season went and the things that had happened in St. Louis prior to that. It was, and I know, and I went back 2 years later and lost to New England. So after that, I can empathize with the guys on the Titans of how hard it is to end up, losing.
To get to that point and win it. It's not easy.
No, it's not. It's not. And just getting there, it's amazing. I think of the Bills that went there 4 in a row and didn't win. But go there 4 times in a row. I mean, just the odds of that, to do that is amazing.
We talked about it a little before, just how much the team changed, in a year. And a lot of people didn't see it coming. Maybe even you didn't, right? You're like, we'll talk about life after sports, but you got to tell us, like, going into that season, what were your expectations? What were you thinking? There was a way that y'all had practiced and prepared, and everything kind of changed so that you guys became a different team and believed differently. Like, how did the belief start changing? And was that just because all of a sudden you had Kurt Warner step up and he was playing lights out?
Well, I mean, he was a huge part of it, but oh man, I'm going to try to run through this fairly quickly, but it was, it's like most things, great recipes, it's not just one ingredient.
Yep.
It was multiple things. But for me, that was an interesting year because I was coming off of a really career-ending type injury. I had dislocated my left knee in the middle of the 1998 season. And total rupture of my ACL, my PCL, my MCL. I had my entire medial meniscus had came off of the tibia plateau, and I had nerve damage, and I had ruptured my medial capsule, and my patella dislocated, and vascular damage, and it was horrendous, and so that was a miracle in itself, right? Because there was a lot of thought that maybe I would never really even walk normal again. That's the kind of damage that had happened. And so I had a former teammate named Leslie O'Neill reached out to me and said, hey, you need to go see this guy in Colorado named Richard Stedman. And I had obviously seen our team doctors and gotten the results of our MRI. And so I went out to Vail, Colorado. And I think I ended up staying there about 5 weeks, and I went and saw this guy, Richard Stedman. I met a young lady named Peekaboo Street who was out there doing rehab, who had had a real bad knee injury maybe 4 or 5 months before me. And I remember seeing David Robinson was in this little bitty rehab room. He was doing something. I met an amazing young man from Italy named Alexandro Del Piero, who was a soccer player. And so, you're Middle Vale, Colorado. It wasn't amazing at the time. It wasn't like some beautiful lodge. I mean, it was like the rehab room was, like a big closet. But the people there were amazing. The physician was amazing, Richard Stedman. And so I ended up having 4 surgeries. And then Dick Vermeil, our coach, I'm sure they could have waived me injured, or they could have thought, hey, this is don't know if it's going to happen for him. But they kept me on the roster, put me on IR, helped take care of my expenses of being in Colorado all that time. Came back to St. Louis. I went back, I think almost every month, went back to Colorado for the next 12 months. Anyhow, they put me on something called PUP, physically unable to perform, which gives me for 6 weeks of the season, and then 3 weeks after that to be back on the roster. And man, we just rehabbed like crazy and then stood on God's word.
What was the normal timeline? I mean, like, it sounds like your legs are just gone.
It was, the timeline was questionable. They weren't sure, right?
Yeah.
They had to reattach the meniscus and suture it down and hope that everything healed up fine. I remember going into surgery, and I had signed releases for 3 cadaver ligaments, and didn't really know. But he was able to re-put my PCL back up into the femur, something called a healing response. But I was unable to do active range of motion for 20 weeks. So I couldn't, bend the leg on my own because it could have ruptured that. And then he had enough of the MCL he was able to pull back together that he thought it was going to grow back in, because that's the one ligament that will heal on its own if you tear it, right? But it was a complete tear. And then the PCL was a graft in, from somebody else, right? And then the rehab, it was just a lot of work and pain and loneliness and suffering a bit, but I just was asking God, Lord, if there's something else for me to do, if I'm going on to something else, I'm just going to trust that your plan's good for me. And if you want me to come back and play, then please light a fire in me that is beyond myself, because this is beyond my own strength and capabilities and my own self-discipline. And then sure enough, I could just start feeling this, waking up with this energy and this desire and a new vision, and my faith was growing and getting stronger. And then I just knew inside deep, like, all right, God, I just trust you that I'm making a comeback.
See, a lot of people go through like an external setback, and I think they're looking for external confirmation. So what you're saying is you go through like the worst injury of your career, and the confirmation came from internal. And you literally just woke up one day and you're like, something's changing in my belief that like I'm still meant to play.
Yeah, I could tell. I was obviously, when you're in a bad spot, right? Especially if someone has faith, like you'll be reaching for God. And I was searching, I was reaching, and I was wanting to know, all right, God, I was in pain, and I was heartbroken. I had worked so hard to be in this position, and got a beautiful young family, and then chasing my dream in the NFL, professional athlete. And then, bang, just one play out of the blue, And guys would always used to say, it's like, I don't know how many football games I played in the NFL that probably wasn't at least one guy throwing up in the bathroom before we walked out to kick off. I mean, it's an intense ordeal, right? And everybody knows that, hey, jobs are on the line every time you step out in the field, and our health and safety's at risk. Guys always knew. There was always a saying that, hey, one play, man. It's like one play could change everything. We're all kind of one play away from this thing could be over. So don't take it for granted. Go out and give your best, and be thankful for the opportunity. It was kind of like that was a reality of game day. Guys understood what was at risk out there. And it was really, I look back and go, man, I'm amazed how many times there was massive collisions. And I thought for sure, like, oh man, something's probably busted, or something's pointing the wrong way. I feel like probably that was a big collision. I'm surprised I'm still awake, And then you would get up and start moving things and go, all right, wow, you're shocked. Like, all right, everything's kind of where it's supposed to be and still moving all right. And let's go again, because it's amazing what the human body really can do when you really train it and, get it fit for doing that kind of stuff. There's a price to pay, no doubt about it. And any guy that's played a long time in the NFL knows that that's the truth. But
How many years did you played up to that injury?
that was in my third year.
So you haven't even thought about a second contract at that point.
No, right? Yeah, I signed a 4-year deal coming out of college, second round draft pick. But at that point, you're just like, oh my gosh, am I still going to be able to pursue this dream?
Is your wife on board at that point? Like, keep going, or is she like, I'm not sure it's worth it?
Yeah, I think she was kind of stunned. My wife was actually, my wife, when I was in training camp that year, she was pregnant and she was starting to have some complications. And she was rushed to the hospital and almost lost the baby. And so my wife was was in and out of the hospital. And then by that time, this was in October, she was in permanent bed rest. She had already been in and out of the hospital several times. She's at home on bed rest. Trying to make sure that she can hold on into the pregnancy and keep our little girl, Grace, who ended up being Grace. And so she's at home on the couch watching the football game and then sees her husband, laying on the field. And the way she tells it, I didn't see the TV version, but she told me that, and I had family confirm it, that they think they had left the field mic on. And so they could hear me screaming through the television. And so, she was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then I came home and then we were both on bed rest. Why I was laying on one couch, she's laying on the other couch, and we already got 2 little kids running around the house and she's pregnant with the third one. And, you're like, wow, living in St. Louis, Missouri and all our families, other places. But we had family come in and help, but it was definitely, we were both going through quite a challenge at the same time.
So you're on PUP. Who was Kurt wasn't starting at the beginning of the year?
Well, in '98, Kurt was, I think our third string quarterback.
Yeah.
I think we had Tony Banks and Joe Germain and then Kurt. And then going into '99, we had, I think they released Tony, and Joe, I think, was a second round draft pick maybe the year before. So Joe, Joe's a young up-and-comer. And then we signed a big free agent, Trent Green. And with Trent, we brought in another huge signing, which was his quarterback coach at the time, who was our offensive coordinator, Mike Martz. And they came in together with this offense that was became known as the greatest show on turf. But, you had Trent was a tremendous player, really at the peak of his prime of his career. And Mike Martz was, he was up and coming, brilliant minded, offensive minded guy. And so just a great combination. They both came in, had known each other, worked together, knew the offense. And so we had actually traded for Marshall Falk. We had drafted Torrey Holt. We had already had Ricky Prohl and Oz Hakeem, and we already gotten Orlando Pace, and we had Kevin Carter, and we got Isaac Bruce, and so it's like we got a talented football team, and we knew going into that off season, we started getting the pieces in. Then when we brought Marshall in, at the end of the off season, we come into training camp, even though I was rehabbing and believing I was going to come back and play. This is my 4th year in the league, and I'm an optimist. And so every year I was like, yeah, we're going to be a good football team. We're going to win football games. We're going to the playoffs. But this was something different. This was something where it was such a spirit of excellence about it. Just had such a good group of guys that had paid the price. Dick Vermeil now's in his 3rd year. Dick Vermeil was legendary for the kind of way that he worked you. And so our theme was gotta go to work. And we had a guy, Billy Long, he was amazing. I loved it. But he'd walk around And he would be out training camp practice, and he would start calling out every position group. Linebackers, gotta go to work. And then tight ends, gotta go to work. Coaches, gotta go to work. Trainers. And then at the end, he'd be like, everybody. And everybody would yell, gotta go to work, right? And so, but that's what Dick Vermeil. Dick, amazing man, relational human being. Dick knows the value of people and not afraid to tell people he loves them. And he cares about the guys that play and who work for him. But, Dick also knows just the truth is the way you work is what you become. And if you want to be great in the NFL or anything, you got to be willing to go pay the price. And so now, we had a group of guys that had some shared suffering over a couple of years through some hard training camps and off seasons. And so we were a group that was talented but hardened and tough and ready to go to work again.
So you go into the season, you're still on PUP.
Yep.
Looking pretty good.
You're not kidding. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Well, before we go into the season, we look amazing in training camp. And it's like, wow, okay. Everybody that's behind the scenes, and we know what the work we put in, we see what's going on, everyone's amazed, like, hey, no one's walking around big chest, but we realize, like, hey, we're talented, and we're going to be a good football team. Like, offensively, we knew, like, we got something pretty special here. We have to see how it's going to play out. And Trent Green looked amazing. And then, in training camp, Mike Martz was pretty hard on Kurt Warner. Mike demanded excellence. Mike really demanded perfection. I mean, that's just how it was. I mean, he was teaching. He was calling out the greatest of the greatest players on the team. He was calling those guys to be at their very best, and everybody else better get on board and try to keep up. And so, and then all of a sudden, so, he's hard on Kurt, but Kurt's having a great camp, and Kurt's tough, and Kurt just lets it, he rolls with it, which is amazing. And then all of a sudden, Trent goes down. Mm-hmm. Trent goes down in the preseason, at the end of the preseason, tears his knee up, and he's out for the year. And, Kurt, guys had watched him in practice and stuff, and you saw how talented he was, and you knew how smart and intelligent he was. But, he hadn't done it in the games really yet very much. And so there was, I think everybody was like, oh, how's this going to work out, right? We're not sure. And we're going to open up the season. I think our first team we played was Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And they were,
was that Ray Lewis?
Yeah, of course, all those guys. I mean, this is Baltimore 99. I mean, they're on the rise, and they are definitely one of the best, if not the best, defense in football. It was probably them in Tampa and Tennessee. You know what I mean? And our team. I mean, we all had good, solid teams. I mean, they were one of the best defenses in football. And so, Kurt Warner's going to come out and play against these guys, and no one really knew what was going to happen. And then Kurt throws for over 300 and tears them up, and we put a bunch of points on the board, and everybody was like, wow,
we got something here.
Yeah, maybe,
You come back that year.
Yeah, I did.
And what happens from there?
Well, it was hard a little bit because, you're so anxious, like, man, you want to play so bad. You see the success that the teams have, and you've putting in some grind, had some rough years there. And then you're watching other guys that are playing in the position that you had been in. But, I was learning a lot and growing a lot. It's like your flesh wants to rise up and just go, man, maybe I'll just sit back here and be quiet and not share some of the things that I've learned or what I see. And then you realize, like, no, man, you know what? I'm trusting God. I am believing that He's going to restore me back to what I had been prior to this injury and greater. And so I'm not going to block the blessing that God has for me by being selfish and not helping others. And so that was one of the first things I was learning was, man, I confronted that in me. And, I think as an athlete, even at the time, as a Christian athlete in particular, I had a real awareness of kind of like, oh, that's my flesh. Like it doesn't want to be disciplined. Like it wants to self-negotiate. It didn't like to run as much as I wanted to make it run. It didn't want to lift as hard as I wanted to make it lift, right? And you recognize like, nope, I don't care. You're doing it anyways, right? Same thing. It's like, oh, wow, yeah, no, you want to kind of hold back or maybe be selfish or just maybe, root for someone to maybe not have as much success because because it's a spot that you want to have, and you realize, no, I'm not letting that go down. Pushing back. No. And so then I just would purposely pour it into the guys in my position group, purposely tried to make sure that I gave them all the things that I knew, everything that I saw to help give my best to them and genuinely want the best, right? I wanted to rejoice with those that were rejoicing, even though maybe internally there was some weeping that was happening inside of me, through that course of that year. So that was a big lesson learned. And then, we were having lots of success, and all of a sudden you're like, we're week 9, 10 into that season, and my opportunity to come back and start playing again. And, which was the whole thing in itself, because, it takes faith to get back out and to get in kind of, I don't know, what's that movie, Days of Thunder, you know what I mean? Like you've been in a bad crash as a race car driver. And then all of a sudden you're going back out onto the track, and you're going to try to go back out and at 200 miles an hour with 40 other cars door to door, and be confident, be comfortable back out doing it. And that's how you kind of feel like, man, all right, last time I was out here, it was all of a sudden in the blink of an eye, life changed. So, and then that was the thing to overcome. Like, all right, man, just trust in God. Like, and that was, for me, it was a big thing where I was like, all right, God, I just totally trust you. I'm nervous. I've got this fear going on in me, but I just stood on God's word and his protection. And then I just realized, like, man, here we go. Just go out and let it roll. And then you do, and you make it through it. And, you grow a little bit more in confidence. And then it was getting my skill levels back, my confidence back, get timing back, all that, which I needed throughout the course of the rest of the year.
You get it back in time, and you're in the Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah. No. Yeah. I'm growing. I'm getting better. I'm playing more. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you realize like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it, but we're going to be playing in the Super Bowl, in a week. For us, it was weird. The 2 Super Bowls I played in that year in particular is that we only had 1 week between the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl. Then the other Super Bowl I played on was not year 9/11 year, and we had postponed the season for a week. And so they made up for it, obviously, was that week between the championship games and the Super Bowl. And so, but yeah. And then the Super Bowl was obviously, for me, it was for me, it was a week of just praising God. I mean, I just had such a heart of thanksgiving that I was going to be there and experiencing that. I don't think there was for a moment, I don't think I was even sleeping without a big smile on my face the whole time. I just was in amazement that, wow, that God, that here it is. I'm going to be here and experience this, and how good and faithful you are.
I mean, a lot of people hit those big moments, and they're the most stressful weeks of their life. And you're like, nope, there's another way to do it.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. That was one of the most, I was at such peace. I remember that whole game, man. I just had this peace and confidence for myself in it. I think Faith Hill did the national anthem, and I can just remember sitting there just bawling like a baby, man. And it was just praising God. It was just a real intimate time for me, and just really worship, just going, wow, God, you're so faithful and so good. And again, kind of like, man, I can't believe that here I am, that I'm able to participate in this today.
So you got to play for the Saints. What is it, like 2007 when you're wrapping up?
Yep. Yeah, go down to New Orleans in 2003.
Yep.
That's when we first come to Nashville. We're splitting our years between here in the off season, there in season. Jim Haslett, talented football team. Just can't quite figure out how to get it over the edge. We got some discipline issues probably. We got some things maturity-wise probably in the team where we needed to grow. And then we go through Hurricane Katrina. And so I'm down in training camp, and my wife and kids are getting ready to come down that week. We got a house that we leased down there in Metairie and full of our furnishings and ready to go for my family to come in. They're getting ready. Kids are getting ready to go to school down there. And obviously flights get canceled. We fly out to the West Coast to finish the preseason. The initial storm comes through, and we're like, hey, didn't turn out so bad. We're getting ready, like, hey, we're saying, hey, we're going to go back. And then, I mean, it was literally probably hours, 10, 12 hours later, levees break, flooding happens. And then it's obviously just a massive tragedy and chaos and all the destruction that happened, and heartbreak and loss. And so, we're all displaced from our families, and we're our city that we're representing, where we live in with our families, and we're watching it go through all that. And a lot of them actually came into San Antonio, where we ended up playing for the year, and we'd be able to go see people that were displaced. Anyhow, so that was a crazy year. Hard on everybody. It was hard on the players, hard on the team, hard on our families. And then that season ends, and then that team really dissolves. The coaching staff's fired, and we hadn't been in New Orleans for a year. And then Sean Payton gets hired, and then Mickey Loomis makes the wise decision to take a shot and take a risk on Drew Brees, who had a horrible shoulder injury in San Diego.
Didn't worry about that shoulder.
No, I mean, I'm sure people were worried about it,
right, but had to take the risk.
But, it's like, took a risk, and, and those two guys combined, Sean Payton, Drew Brees. It kind of reminded me a bit of Mike Martz and Trent Green in the sense of they hadn't worked together, but, Drew Brees was just a hard-working, blue-collar, dedicated, good human being. He was like Trent, like Kurt Warner. I mean, those kind of guys, they're just Mark Bolger. I mean, they're guys, they're just salt of the earth, hardworking, just guys that these are guys you want to be part of your family type guys. It's this. And then Sean Payton, just same type of thing, just very sharp, just a spirit of excellence about him, and is a leader. You can tell. By that time in my career, too, I realized that, there's kind of lieutenants, and then there's generals, and I think a lot of people want to be generals, but there may be great position coaches, there may be great coordinators, but maybe they're not generals. There's something special about really being the one that's casting the vision, the corporate vision for the whole team, can help cast a vision for each guy individually, for both sides of the ball, for special teams, lead by example, hold people accountable, operate with a spirit of excellence that demands others to keep rising to that level. And so I was just so grateful that throughout my career, college and on, even high school, I was able to be around amazing coaches that had those types of qualities, and others, but so grateful for the ones that really had that excellence on them.
Called it out in you, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and you saw what it looked like, yeah.
So when did you retire? When did you decide to hang it up?
2007. I had that big knee injury on my left knee. But that was my year. That was year 3, right? Well, then that same year before that knee injury, I had broken several ribs. A few weeks prior to that, I was knocked unconscious for minutes on the field, having seizures on the field, had to go stay the night in the hospital.
Were you doing the arm thing?
Oh, yeah, totally, yeah. Ooh. The fencing response before. I mean, it was like got hit in the temple and immediately was in that, what they call a fencing response, where my arms and legs were kind of extended and locked out as I'm falling down to the ground. Then I have that huge knee injury. I come back at my end, and then at the end of my time in St. Louis, I had another partial ACL tear. I go to New Orleans, I break my fib of my right ankle, and I rupture all the inside ligaments, deltoid ligaments of my ankle. I have another PCL injury, multiple microfractures on my right knee. I have
we got a wheelchair waiting for you right now. What?
So, I mean, that's what happens when you play football a long time. especially I think in the eras that I was in. The middle of the field was big guys operated in there, and it was dangerous, and there wasn't lots of protections for us. There wasn't kind of that defenseless, the ball, the ball could be over your head, and guess what? It's coming your direction. You're going to have, a safety's probably coming downhill or linebacker, and they're going to let you know that they don't want you throwing the ball in the middle of the field. My whole career, we had the wedge.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the wedge. I played fullback and I played tight end. But that's the game I grew up and loved, and I loved that part actually when I was a player. That was, I think that mentality was, hey, well, that's right. I am in the middle of the field here operating. You come hit me, it's gonna
You're gonna
price
feel
to
it
pay
as well.
for that
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So, what's that moment? Do they call you and they say, "Hey, we're cutting you"? Do you call them? Like, how's that work?
I got released by the Saints. I'd had at the time, what was that? I think I had my 11th knee surgery. It was a microfracture on a knee that had some reconstruction work and some meniscus removed and trimmed, and already had a microfracture on the lateral side. This is the medial side. And, I had been able to come back from injury after injury after injury. But, I'm getting older. I'm 34, going to be turning 35. And I had, I had rehabbed and came back and did all the things. I knew that was a big part of it, and I was disciplined, and that had been a big part of my life, right? So that was just part of how I was wired. But then I just knew. I remember when I went and visited some teams as a free agent, coaches that I knew that were coaching other places I had played for were, hey, come in for a visit. And I was like, I don't know. They're like, come on, just come in for a visit. So I go up and do a visit, and they do a physical. And I was like, man, I don't think I'll pass a physical. I think they would have passed me if I said, yeah, I'll come play for a little bit. But I just knew, like, man, my knee, I just could tell, like my right knee in particular, when I did NFL quality, explosive movement, powerful stuff, I could go maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then my leg would be so achy and sore I could hardly walk the rest of the day. It'd be swollen for the rest of the week. And so I knew. And then I finally, I called back out to my doctor in Colorado, Richard Stedman, and I talked to him and asked him his opinion, honestly, and said, hey, doc, what do you think? I could maybe, do an unloader brace and tape it up and gut it out. And he just said, in his opinion, he said it didn't think it would be worth it. And that if I did, I'd be looking at probably a knee replacement within maybe 5 years. And so then I thought, well, you know what? Probably going to be, I think I need to wrap this thing up and be done playing football.
The average person on the outside is like, man, why would you ever quit? You could sign another 1-year contract and make a quick mill, What goes through your mind? I mean, at that point, is it I've already made enough money that my health is more important? Is it just you just know it's not even like how? Because the average person's like, dude, you could make $1 million. Who cares about a knee surgery?
Yeah, no, I think part of it is, I think, you've done it long enough. You do, you've been able to earn some resources, and you've lived a little bit of life, and you're going, well, and so you're thinking, if I was 10 years younger and just getting rolling, and they were like, maybe you go play football a couple years, but you're going to, maybe have to have your knees replaced at 30, and you're 22 or 3, you're like, yeah, man, I think I'm just going to roll with it. Maybe get a chance to make some money, but you're right. So yeah, you all that stuff's going through your head. And for me, honestly, at the time, I'd already been married for quite a few years. We had 4 kids, and I'm looking at my kids too, and I'm thinking, I don't want to be limping around. I don't want to be immobile. I want to be able to run around the backyard with my kids and be able to goof off and throw the ball around with them and chase them. And so that was honestly a big factor for me. What gave me some peace about it. Like, this is the right decision. Like, I can't go out and be a professional athlete anymore like I want to, but I can still be dad and do stuff with my kids and have fun with them and still be active. And so that was, I think, one of the big things that kind of gave me peace. Like, yeah, this is the right decision.
So do you have an official retirement ceremony, or it's just kind of?
No, you just kind of know, like, yeah, I'm done playing. You don't. Yeah. I think, you might have been able to call the league office, and there's not really paperwork you file. Once you're off a roster for, 12 months, it's like, hey, your severance comes. It's like, hey, all right, like, yeah, you're retired from the NFL. And so I just knew like, hey, I'm done. I'm gonna get a little severance here, get a little money to kind of get me in this first year outside of football or whatever. And then, so for me, it was okay. I got some resources that are still coming in. And so I'm going to just kind of take this first year and figure out, what is the next thing for me, and just kind of try to catch my breath and slow down. And when you're living at a high level, playing professional sports and married and 4 kids and, even in college, while we were married in college, had our daughter in college, I was full-time football and track and field. It's like I look back and go, man, the Lord, I don't even know where you gave that energy to me. I like hitting snooze 2 or 3 times in the morning. But for some reason, He just would fuel me, and both my wife and I, we were rolling pretty hard, and so it was time for me to just kind of go, okay, and it was hard. Even that, it was hard to sit down and try to be still when I first stopped.
When you stop, everybody forgets that like you spend a lot of time doing this stuff. And even though, you've got success and money, there's things that you didn't get to do. What was the one thing where you're like, I'm retired, I can finally, do this? Did you ever have one of those moments where you're like, man, I never got to do this before?
Probably me, if it was probably bad stuff, it took me a while, but after about a year, maybe 2, I kind of let myself go on my diet, a little off my diet. I really was disciplined. I was pretty disciplined probably even as a young teenager. I had my sister, Pauline. She started training me when I was probably 13, 14 years old. I had a dream to want to go to the Olympics as a decathlete. And she would pick me up before school, and we'd train, and we'd do track all spring and all summer long, all through middle school and high school pretty much. But even then, I was like, we were training. I was disciplined. I was going to nutrition, seminars and stuff.
You were early, bro.
Young guy, right? So I was like, man, I'm just going to eat what I want to eat, and just give myself kind of that grace to not even worry if I get a little heavy, And so that was probably the thing that I probably gave myself some grace on. Like I said, it still took me a few years to probably let my guard down enough to go, you know what, not really, And then you go, okay, enough of this, right? It's like, okay, now it's time to flip the switch and don't let all the hard work you put out there, fade away.
Yeah. So you're taking a break for a year or 2. And then you're like, all right, what am I doing? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, when we're done, I think the natural tendency is to think, I'm just going to maybe get into coaching or get it. Because, here it is, here, I've got a doctorate in football.
Yeah.
Right? It means like I just spent 5 years in college and 11 years in the NFL. And I was a high level in college, high level professionally. So my whole adult life, this is what I've been training for and studying and preparing and becoming an expert in. And so you feel like you got a lot to give there, and that's really where your expertise is. But there's limited opportunities. And then also you kind of look and you go, man, what are the demands of that? I can remember when I first got done, I think it was a year after I called a coach of mine. And I asked him what he thought about coaching for me. I said, hey, Coach, I'm thinking about this. I won't tell you who he was, but Coach I loved and admired. And he told me, yeah, he didn't think it was a good idea for me because he knew who I was as a man, and he knew the family that I had, and he knew that if you go get into coaching, it's not as it's more chaotic than being a player, and it's even more time consuming and stressful. And he thought, man, I didn't want to do that to my family. I did do some volunteer coaching at CPA football, and I did track and field. And then I did that 07 and 08. And then in 09, I took a job at the NFL Players Association. As a player in the NFL, I was very active in the Players Association. I came in as a rookie. I think my track and field background the track and field athletes that I was a part of in the 90s, some of my college teammates were Olympians, discus throwers. It was so much more advanced about the way they trained and prepared for big meets and the Olympics and different things. And I got to the NFL and I thought, man, I bet they're going to be really scientific and it's going to be the best of the best. And it's going to be all about maximizing our ability to perform on game day. And I showed up and I was like, what in the world, man? It was not that way. Maybe some places, but it wasn't when I first got to St. Louis. And, it was a business and they weren't really trying to spend a bunch of money at the time and a bunch of different things. Free agency had only been in the NFL for a few years when I got in by the mid 90s. And so, and that was having an impact, but it hadn't quite made the impact yet that it was going to, as far as making other, it's like, colleges had to do it already because they weren't drafting you. Colleges had to have beautiful facilities and stadiums and weight rooms and nutritionists and meal programs because they were trying to get you to come to Nebraska or Washington or Oregon or Miami or Florida State or Notre Dame. Right? They were all having to try to recruit you. The NFL is like, no, we drafted you or we're signing you. We're paying you to come here. Yeah, no. But free agency brought that element in. So anyhow, yeah. It was interesting when I first got in the NFL, the difference of what I thought it was going to be and what it really was.
So you go work for the PA. How somebody call you? Hey.
Yeah, I mean, I got called. I think what happened. Well, I had, for I think 10 of my 11 years, I was either a rep or a vice president in the union as a player, and really my passion was health and safety. Obviously I'd been through a fair amount of injuries myself and I'd seen other guys and I just always had a heart for my brothers in the locker room, and see guys get injured and get cut or maybe not the best medical treatment all the time or, or just some of the harsh things that happen in the way. Sometimes you would train and you go, really? It's like people are making decisions about the way that, it's like this body's ability to perform is my business. And I got people that don't really know a lot about training, nutrition, recovery, the best things for me for my business to really flourish, but yet I've got to follow their direction. I am bound to do all the things they're asking me to do. And so you're like, interesting, right? So then Gene Upshaw had passed away. I had done all my work with Gene Upshaw, but there was a gentleman there, Jason Belzer, another guy, Tom Carter, other people I knew at the NFLPA, legal staff, etc. And I went to Gene's funeral. I think when I saw them there, I don't know, I'm guessing, but I think maybe that sparked their memory that, oh yeah, Ernie did help drive, because when I was, like I said, we go to all our meetings, that was pretty much just, I was ringing the same bell all the time about health and safety standards, concussion protocols. We didn't have any, it was like, just all the things that I could talk for. We could have another dozen podcasts on talking about all the stuff. But anyhow, and so then they brought me in for an interview, and D. Smith had just been hired, Damari Smith, and I think Damari Smith definitely had a desire to want to have an impact on player health and safety. Knew we were about to get into a big fight labor-wise. We had a lockout in 2010. So I came in and was a player director, managed so many teams, a certain amount of teams, and then helped be a voice and help direct the player health and safety initiatives at the Players Association.
What's it like when you're making NFL money and then you get a regular? I mean, it's still a pretty fun job, PA, but definitely not going to pay you like NFL. What's that like? Be like, I mean, you want a job because you need purpose. Are you like, yeah, that number is okay, I guess? I mean, do you even think about it in the money
I mean, I think you do. You do, because you think about, okay, well, all right, I'm in management. I'm in I got good benefits, and you realize like, yeah, I'm not. I think especially after you've been in the NFL for a while and you've had some life experience, and you got your family and all the people that you're in your friend group and everything that aren't in the NFL. And if you got some sense about you realize like, yeah, this is monopoly money. Like you realize that this isn't normal. This isn't real. Like this isn't how life really is in the real world, if you will. But still, obviously it's an adjustment. And the time commitment for me, it was like, having to be in DC, and we're going to New York, and we're having negotiations, and we're traveling all around the country, visiting guys at the teams, and then guys when they were locked out and finding them. So, I mean, it was, the good thing about it for me was this. I had just recently got done playing. My wife was used to kind of the schedule of what the NFL was. I traveled even on home games. You're going to the team hotel, or going into the meeting. It's like she was used to me kind of being gone and different things in that training camp, mini camp. And she knew how much I cared about the guys that played the game. And so it ended up actually, I know a lot of people kept asking my wife, like, oh my gosh, your husband, he travels all the time. He's doing this. And she would always just kind of go, she didn't get it, because she goes, oh, that's what our life's always been. And then even the last few years in New Orleans, and we were back and forth. And actually my kids stayed here that whole year, Katrina year 2006 or 2005. And then I came in the off season. Then I went back to New Orleans, and I went there for the off season and back and forth. And then once training camp and for the season, my wife and kids still stayed here that whole year. We didn't go back to New Orleans. And then I retired. So the point I'm making is, as a family, we were used to kind of that being apart a bit. But yeah, I think the hardest part, to be honest with you, though, to get back to your point, was the level of accountability and the level of probably discipline and attention to detail, and of what the reality of living and working in the kind of the human performance industry. It just, even on teams that maybe aren't the Super Bowl caliber teams, just the environment of being on a professional athletic team and environment, it brings a level of intensity and accountability and discipline where there's a lot of excellent things being done around you every day. People have discipline. And then I think that just becomes the norm for you. And people are actually hungry to want to get better. And even if they're not, they're going to get called out anyways. Yeah. And you're going to be reviewed in front of with your peers in the room. And it's like, hey man, the film doesn't lie. It's like, yeah, you were, that's a loaf. You were not given your best effort, and you're going to get called out, and everyone's going to be in here going, that's right. And you're going to have to take it on the chin and say, yeah, man, that's right. And maybe I'm going to be doing some up downs before practice, because that's the reality of what it was on film. And so you get used to being in that environment, and you like it, and you're hungry for it, and you get used to it. And then you leave that and go into the real world. And I can remember people actually asking me and some coworkers at the NFLPA to shut the door, because we were all former players. And the way that we were actually talking to each other, the way that we were actually correcting one another and telling each other, hey, this PowerPoint, maybe, we were like sharing decks and that. And we were having a great time, but it was actually offending people in the office, because they thought we were being harsh on one another. They wanted us to shut the door because it was disrupting, and it was offending people in the office, because the way that
this is the feedback loop we're used to.
Yeah, and so that was an eye opener. Like, wow, like, yeah, it's like you almost, now it's like to ask somebody to just do their job. I have to now. I guess I have to first tell them how grateful I am and praise them for just being available, and then ask them to please do the thing that their job requires them to do, and hope that they do a good job. And so, and there's amazing people that work at the NFLPA, and there's amazing people that do great work there. But the point I mean is, it's just a different environment, right? And you realize, like, yeah, it's not the NFL. It's not the locker room. It's not these meeting rooms. And so that point is, like, that's the adjustment. And you're like, oh, okay. And so I think that was just weird, because, you have this level that you kind of have yourself and your expectations, and then the reality of maybe the world that you're working in and how things are operating. And there's a lot of great things about it. Yeah, you don't need to come in the office and call people out like you would in the locker room after you got your butt handed to you by the Green Bay Packers last week, or yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, right. And again, they're not making $1 million to come in here and do this, Some of them are barely getting enough to scrape by when you're in a place like DC or New York, and they're riding in on the subway and taking the bus, and commuting in 70 minutes just to get into work.
So the standard of excellence is pretty high in your life for like 30 years. You go somewhere else, you're like, I actually have to adjust to the new norm, which is lower. What's it like with the family when you retire? Are they like, Dad, can you settle down? Like, we're not used to you being around this much.
That, for my wife, for sure. I think my kids dig the fact that Dad was around,
Yeah.
But I think for sure, I mean, it was hard on the family in the sense that, from really the inception of our marriage, we got married in college, and I was a full-time student, full-time athlete. And I was, I was home, but I was gone most of the day, and I was working hard, and I was training and providing for the family. And all of a sudden, it's like my wife had her routine, and the house had its routine, and the kids had their routine. And now here's like a big, heavy boat anchor just sitting down in the middle of the living room that's now involved. And so that was interesting to find out what that was going to be like. My wife was definitely ready for me to take that job at the NFLPA and to get my butt out of the house and start traveling and doing some stuff.
Yeah,
so
she was.
That was good, but initially, it was hard, and that's been and that's kind of put us on our journey, because I feel like, gosh, we've been married over 30 years, and that was a challenge on our relationship to kind of find out what is the new norm and our different, now communicating about different things and having more time to really get to know her more and differently and observe different things and appreciate her in different ways. So, and I'm still trying to do that.
Are we all?
Right.
What's the, when you make a chunk of money in a short amount of time, and then it's kind of, all right, now it's back to normal life. What were the things that you did financially that were like the best moves or that you wish you would have done,
Yeah. I think for us, the challenge we had was, you're right. We came into some money, you get drafted, you get a signing bonus, you're making good money playing in the NFL. And, neither my wife and I came from families that had any real resources. And so we were trying to figure out, well, what do we do? What do we do? We know we should invest money. And so, we got approached by different people that had financial advisors, and I knew some guys that were on the team I was on, or I played in college with, or had other connections, names that I recognized that this, this firm. And so we're young, and it's like, okay, we're gonna trust these people. It sounds like they know what they're doing. They gave us a great presentation, and so and they've got some track record. We tried to do our due diligence, and so okay, we're trying to invest our money. We're trying to live in a budget, and we're trying to not. We're assuming, kind of like my wife and I think we came in the NFL thinking, okay, like if I think we almost lived every year like if this is, we have to assume like this is it. Like maybe this, like we assumed every year, like this is the last year we're going to be in the NFL. And so we always tried to live that way. So I think that was one of the best things we did. We never lived with up to our means. We tried to live within a budget. But that being said, we trusted people to come in and help run our finances. And I think the mistake that was made was because it was kind of a language I didn't understand and speak. Sometimes the people I spoke with, I felt like they, probably my own pride and my own embarrassment, I would act like I understood things I didn't understand by just being agreeable. I should have dug more, asked more questions. I should have demanded to be more educated instead of just kind of going along with it. So I think one of the big mistakes was I let those things help direct me some, and then all of a sudden find out that we were getting lied to. We were getting scammed. We got put into a Ponzi scheme. Yeah, right out the gate.
All right, stop right there. You got to tell us about that. That's what everybody's want to know. How do you get in a Ponzi scheme?
Okay,
What
right.
happened?
So this I'm not going to give to. I don't know what I can and can't share legally, but anyhow, so yeah, we find out we're in a Ponzi scheme because I think that he ends up getting arrested, the financial advisor. And we're like, what's going on here, right? And I think, and some guys that I knew that I had played with, and they were saying, hey man, this guy, where's my money? What's going on here? Find out that he had taken a bunch of money. He had bought property in the West Coast on the ocean, was going to develop it. Couldn't get the property rezoned. So then didn't end up working out the way that he was hoping it was going to work out. And then he was taking money, obviously, from other investors and paying these ones back in here. And so all of a sudden it all gets exposed. And then the property, it's a real asset, ends up having to be sold, but everybody gets pennies back on the dollar. And guys that he put a bunch of that into that were later in their careers, it was just wrecked them financially. So then, so we're like, oh my gosh, so we're like, okay, we took it on the chin there, but we're young in our NFL career. And so we're moving on. Well, then, we're hungry. We're like, what do we do next? And so we got, so that we decide to kind of go the route of faith. And so we're getting encouraged through some people that, we're, that have got, that we have kind of given some spiritual authority in our life. And they're kind of influencing us and telling us that we should use this firm that's godly and Christian based. And then they know how to say all the right things. And it's a lot of the language that we like. And it's kind of the heart that we have. We want to give, we believe in that. And, but again, it was almost kind of like, so in the first time around, it's like, okay, I'm not as educated as I should be, and I'm trusting people, and I get taken advantage of. The second iteration is, okay, I've learned a little bit more. I feel like I'm a little bit more educated, and now I've got somebody that's maybe aligned with me faith-wise, and they're really driving that. And so there's kind of like this maybe a overconfidence and maybe a trust again, where it's like, well, okay, like they're going to do the right thing and they're going to honor God with everything that they do and how they're running their business. And then through that, you find out that, at the same time that, they're people too. And sometimes they make mistakes and lead you in the wrong direction. And so again, we get encouraged to do some investing or do some things that ended up being damaging to us financially. Again, second time around, we're like, oh my gosh. And so then finally, I think it's 2003, I meet a guy here in Nashville named Mitch Martin. Thank God for Mitch. And Lou Taylor. And Lou, her firm, her company comes in and really just helps kind of get everything in order for us. We're just discouraged. We'd signed. We're down in New Orleans. I've kind of got it's my third contract. I know like I've got, what do I got? 3 or 4 years left in me. If I, God willing and trusting him for it. But it's like, okay, I've already probably played longer than the average guy. Maybe I probably played twice as long as maybe the average guy right now. I still know that I feel like I feel like I'm as good as I've been, but you realize like, yeah, hey, this thing's coming to an end sooner than later. And it's like, what are we going to do now? And so anyhow, this was more of, my wife and I were real like, this is like, but so now we come in, we're kind of a wounded animal. Yeah. We're asking all kinds of questions. We're not very trusting. And this guy has the heart of a teacher. And we got people that are doing what they say they're going to do. They're starting to build a little bit more trust back in us. We're seeing the fruit of it, and they've got excellence on them, and they're helping us kind of grow and learn and kind of just get things rebalanced and back in order financially, our house in a sense. And then he had patience with us to keep walking with us. And then, hey, what's going on? Come in, meet us anytime, reaching out to us. And now, gosh, we've walked with him for over 20 years, and his son's now helping run the business, and we've watched him grow up and mature. And so we're just grateful that, that we were able to be connected. But yeah, I mean,
what do you tell yourself your rookie year financially, what do you say? Hey man, here's how you need to think about this.
Yeah, I think probably the first thing I would say is you don't need to do anything. You can put that money in the bank if you want to and don't have to make any decisions you don't have to be pressured. If you don't touch your money, I don't care if you let it sit in the bank for a year and a half and nothing just sits in the bank account. Yeah, you're not going to be making the interest you could have been working in the market, all that stuff, but don't feel like you have the pressure to make a decision until you feel educated and comfortable enough and have enough checks and balances that you've asked enough people, that you've talked to guys that have invested, that you feel comfortable that I'm going to make a decision. And then I would say, then make a slow decision. Maybe you don't put it all in one place initially. And then, so those are some of the things I would have probably told myself, that, you don't have to be in a hurry. And I would tell myself that, I think what you realize is that a lot of times financial people will come in and they're trying to sell you that they're going to create wealth for you. And they're going to accumulate all this wealth the way they invest and how they get these returns, and they're going to all this diversification and where they're going to move this and that, and and the reality is, when you're a professional athlete, an entertainer, even a business person that and you're in your zone, you're hitting it, like you're at the peak of your game, you're generating revenue. You're generating revenue. Your financial people, really, their job is revenue preservation.
That's right.
You don't need people that are going to go out and try to make you all this money. The reality is they're in the business of making sure that they're preserving the revenue that you are bringing in, because you're going to bring in the majority maybe of your life's income in this 8, 10, 15-year window maybe, right? And so, hey, that's how I'd look at it, And then there's other things that I've learned along the way. My financial guy, he's, like I said, the heart of a teacher, so he's done great, and I've learned a lot from him. But some of the things, but I love I think I learned it from him years and years ago, but it was kind of the 5% rule. Meaning, because you think about, it's like, how am I going to live after football? Like, I'm going to work and do stuff, but okay. 5% rule, meaning, hey, you can, you can probably assume that you could be able to live off 5% of what you've put away. Like, it can generate, like, what you put away is working asset for you. It's like, it's an employee that works for you. And you can assume that what you put away that you could probably take 5% of it, and you're not going to have to necessarily jump into the principal. Like, it can just keep producing that for you and produce it for you, and it can actually maybe even keep growing for you. Meaning, hey, if I'm living on $50,000 a year, that would mean I need $1 million put away. If I'm going to live on $250,000 a year, I need $5 million put away. Working for me, invested, right? So just some of those simple concepts where you go, how much money do I need to put away to think I could live when I'm done playing? Because the reality is, in my generation, I mean, I made good money for when I was playing, but every generation goes, gosh, the guys played in the 80s before I got into the 90s are going, oh my gosh, I could have retired after 3 years for what you played in the 90s. I played 10 years and I was broke when I left. Now you got same thing. Guys like, oh my gosh, guys making money now. It's like, oh my gosh, I could have retired after 1 year. They're making more in a year than I did in 10 years. It is what it is, But even now, make $1 million. I don't, this isn't a political statement, but if you make $1 million playing the NFL, you're going to be lucky if 500,000 of it ends up into one of your accounts at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're going to pay a lot of money to the federal government. You're going to pay taxes to different agencies that you've never even heard of that have different initials behind them. And they're going to come take money out of your paycheck. You're going to pay taxes in pretty much every state that you play in as a professional athlete. People don't know that part.
They don't know that you actually have to pay taxes. Like when you played in a game in California or New York.
Yep.
You're paying taxes on that weekly check,
and there's
right?
jock taxes, and they'll they're hitting you with taxes for coming in, a city tax, a county tax. So you got agents fees, could be 1, 2, 3% of your salary. You got union dues that you're going to be paying. So it's like, the point is, if you're making $1 million, you're not putting $1 million in the bank. If you're making $1 million, you're going to probably see somewhere between $460 to $520,000 or whatever, right? It's like you accountants, but assume easy math is half. Assume half of your money is going to be gone. So if you're making $1 million, half of it's going to be gone. Well, then if you spend $250,000 that year, then now you got $250,000 in the bank. Well, you do that you play 4 years in the NFL, and every year you made $1 million, and you took $500,000, but then you spent $250,000 and $250,000. It's like, okay, you played 4 years, 5 years, fifth year you're getting released. You got $1 million put away. That's amazing, and that's great. But you're 26, 7 years old. That $1 million in the bank, like I said, if you're going to live on $50,000 a year, that you could probably get by on that. But like I do, 50,000 probably is not going to cut it.
Yeah, and when you play in pro sports, it is very hard for you to think like, I'll live off.
And you've been spending $250,000 a year.
Yeah.
So then what happens is you first year maybe you don't know you're out of the NFL. You live like you did, like you were. So you spend another $250,000, and all of a sudden now you're like, oh wow, now they got $750 in the bank. Now I better figure something out here. So and then guys are generous. Guys give money away. I've known a lot more guys that have lost money just giving it away to people and friends and family than it was, taking, private jets to, Las Vegas and spending it in the casino.
Why is that tough for guys to say no?
Well, I think we want to take care of our family. Like guys are generous. Guys want to help out, and it's because it's crazy money. It's monopoly money, and because you're confident, you're young, you got swagger. You're like, man, you think like, hey, I'm going to be doing this. Like, I'm going to do this at least 5, 6. I'm going to do this at least 10 years. You're ignorant. You don't really know. You're naive. You're not sure. Like, you think it's going to be like that. It's not the reality. And so, and then I think sometimes too, guys, you come in as a young professional. If you've never really had a job before, if all you've really done is been a student and an athlete, and now you're 21, 22 years old, you got a few $1 million coming into the bank. And like we said, you hire a business manager, you hire a financial advisor, you hire a marketing person, you have an agent, you have maybe a tax accountant. You're running a small business, and now you're in the most stressful environment you've ever been in. You're not in college on scholarships. You showed up now. You got 90 grown men that are professionals that are here to pay the bills and take care of their families. And there's going to be 50 spots basically available. And so, and then there's going to be practice squad, all that 53 on. But the point is, it's like, hey, this isn't guaranteed, and every guy showing up here is working for limited spots. And so that's a reality that starts to hit guys. And so what happens is that environment, the reality of that, the stress level of that, the commitment, the work ethic, all that goes on, you trust these other people to take care of it. And so then you're kind of out of sight, out of mind. Guys aren't realizing how much money they're spending. Oh, yeah, flying people into games, taking everybody out to dinner, buying tickets to everybody to come to the games. Oh, not that big a deal. Well, here's 10 grand, there's 15 grand, there's 20 grand, there's 8 grand, there's 6 grand, there's 15 grand, there's 20 grand, there's 22 grand, there's 8 grand. All of a sudden, well, guess what, man? That money starts burning up pretty fast.
Is there anything, like if you go back and you're like, all right, I gotta have the right people, is what I hear you saying, and figure out how to do that, maybe ask a lot more questions. And then in the process, is there a better way you'd look back and like manage it? So, and maybe you weren't giving all that money out, but like, man, I'm looking at my finances every, month, or somebody else has helped me do that. Is there anything you do different?
Yeah, I mean, of course, right?
Yeah.
Of course you would look back and go, yeah, I would do things differently. I think I told you earlier, I would have made myself a little bit more, I would have been more patient. I think part of it, I didn't have the self-confidence. These other people, I felt like, man, they're so much smarter than I am. They speak all this finance and investment language and, securities and bonds and stocks and mutual funds and all this. You're like, oh man, and obviously when I started kicking off, this is kind of pre-internet, cell phone, all that stuff. So it was like more limited information. And I mean, I was trying to learn and I was doing some stuff, but And I think, again, it was, you know, kind of out of that insecurity a little bit. You almost get directed in an area where maybe you're merely not that comfortable, and you just kind of convince yourself like, well, just go along with it. Right. So I would definitely have tried to change that. And then, you know, you could always probably live tighter on a tighter budget. I think my wife and I, the one thing maybe we wouldn't have done maybe is, what happens is, I think, you know, you get more resources and it's like, okay, let's get a little nicer house. We'll get a little nicer car. And then you make a few more, you know, the more resources come in, and then you think, well, maybe a little nicer house and a little nicer car. And then I think what happened is we finally got to the point where we're like, you know what? This house is way too big. It's way more than we need. We don't need to be driving around in you know, it's like, so I think we kind of actually had this, my wife and I both just had this agreement and kind of a check in our spirit, like, you know, there's not that this, you know, like, well, we don't have a poverty mentality. It's not what I'm talking about. The point I'm making is, it's like, you know what, I think you kind of find out, where are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
Like, we're comfortable living in just a normal kind of middle class neighborhood, you know, and so I think that's the thing. It's like, for us, it's like, you realize it's the nicer house doesn't do anything for you. The nicer car doesn't really do anything. It's like, you realize, like, you know what? You waste a lot of money, I think, thinking that's a little bit nicer is going to, you know, and like anything, it's like, it's cool for about 90 days.
Yeah.
And then you're like, big deal. You know what I mean? And you're going, gosh, you know, I would have been better just putting that money over here, just saving it, or, you know, or giving it away to something and help somebody else out.
All right, so let's close it out. Doesn't have to be about money, but anything. If you go back, rookie year, how old are you, 21?
No, I was 23.
23.
I was an old rookie. Yeah. I graduated high school at 18. So my freshman year in college, I was 19 and I redshirted.
Okay.
But anyhow, yeah, if I could look back, I think for myself, what I realize and I would tell is, just remind them that to not cast away their confidence. You know, I think when you come into the NFL, there's maybe a facade that gets put on of this, you know, that, hey, man, I got it together, I'm confident. But at the end of the day, look, you're a rookie. And you're around grown men that are pros, and you realize that they are good at what they do. And some of them, you recognize them. You've watched them play on Sundays and in the playoffs. And so I think there's kind of this natural thing that kind of starts attacking your mind a little bit, you know, where you maybe start doubting yourself a little bit. And for me, you know, they were asking me to move from playing from tight end to fullback. So, you know, I'm used to fighting guys, you know, wrestling bears at the line of scrimmage, and now I'm trying to find a guy 8-10 yards away from me. And so I just feel like if that was one of the things I would have told myself was just to remind you that, yeah, hey, that you're here for a reason, that you are a great athlete, and that just be an athlete, that you can do this. And even if it's hard and it's unfamiliar and it's difficult, that don't throw away your confidence, but trust that you have the ability to do it, that you're here for a reason, and to don't doubt and just go for it 100 miles an hour, right? Because this is an amazing opportunity, and you don't want to let it slip by and to miss it because you were sitting in doubt and unbelief and really hamstrung yourself and didn't allow yourself to give your best effort.
I love it, man. Hey, I appreciate the time. I think it's going to be insightful for a lot of guys that are in the league or about to be in the league, and everybody else to understand what it's like. So I appreciate it, man.
Of course, anytime. Let's do it again.
Let's do it.